So Paul thinks then that Jesus, or Paul, or whoever wrote the hymn, thinks that Jesus is the first one over all creation, who reigns over everything, visible and invisible, that he reigns over spiritual powers, that he is sovereign over all things. He is above all things. That means there's nothing that reigns over him. When you think about the spiritual world, they thought about the earth. Then they thought about the spiritual things that kind of influence people on earth. Then they thought about heaven. So you kind of, the higher you go, the more power you got. And so Jesus is spatially high as a way of referring to the completeness of his reign. But not only is Jesus over all things, it says in him all things hold together. Creation wasn't just began by Jesus as some kind of divine clockmaker who made it and then said, good luck, everybody. I'm going to go over here and take a nap. No, Paul says that Jesus sustains creation by his power. That if Jesus were to stop holding creation together, it would dissipate. In him, all things hold together. He is also, according to Paul, the head of the body, which is the church, in the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. Jesus is the uniting force and the authority in the church. And he is not just the beginning of the first creation. He's the one by whom all things are created. He's also the firstborn from the dead. He's the one whose death inaugurated the new creation. So Jesus in all things might be preeminent. The important part about this, the implication is, the story of Christianity, this is where I think the people who talk about apocalyptic theology are correct. The story of creation, the story of Christianity is not simply about the forgiveness of our sins. That is true, that we have a problem with sin that Jesus has dealt with. But there's also the reality that the world was under the power of the dominion of darkness, and that Jesus, by his resurrection, has led to a new creation where we're going to enjoy all of the fruits of God's redemption. So we don't just need a new heart. We can think about it this way. We don't just need a new heart. We also need a new world. And Paul here speaks about the idea that Jesus has brought us into a new world. The last thing he says here, didn't have time. Why was Jesus able to do all of this? He says, for it pleased God to have the fullness, all his fullness dwell in him. That Jesus wasn't partially God, but that Jesus was fully God. There's this image in Isaiah, I think that some of you might recognize it, where Isaiah sees the vision of God in Isaiah chapter 6. And it says, the glory of the Lord fills the temple. That everywhere he looked, he saw glory. And Isaiah said, woe to me because I'm a sinful man. When Paul talks about Jesus here, he's not saying that the fullness of God's glory, the fullness of God's deity dwelled in Jesus. That Jesus was fully man, fully human, but fully God, such that when we see Jesus, we can fall at his feet and say glory.